Charts are pretty amazing. They can take something like this and turn it into a map for us to use, like this. I'm Sarah Scher from Imagine Landscapes, and today we are going to be going over the basics of chart reading. Before we get too deep into our discussion of charts and chart symbols, I want you to think about how you work when you knit. You start by casting on, you work, and you build up from where you started. So unlike when we read, when we start at the top and go down, when we knit, we actually start at the bottom and go and build this direction. So when we read charts, we're going to do the same thing. So the first row of a chart is the bottom of the chart. And if we cover everything above where we're working, you can see sort of a simpler plan of what we're supposed to do. So here we've got our plan, here we've got our deciphering, and those are the key things we need. We need the chart, we need the key to the chart, and then also designers will have an abbreviation section that explains what they mean by these keys. So for instance, here, a box with nothing in it means knit. Whereas if we look at this chart, the key on this says on the right side we knit, on the wrong side we purl. So that's that symbol. And here there's a dot that says on the wrong side we purl, and on the right side we knit to make that happen. So you can see here that this chart is much more complex because there are so many more symbols than there are for this one that is a color work chart. And the color work chart is kind of nice because it's just sort of showing us the colors we're working on. So it's usually quite simple to approach, which is why we're starting with that today and not starting with this one, but we'll get there. So we've got our key, and our key tells us some important things. It's telling us that the light color is whatever your color 1 is. So it might be white, or in this case, it might be pink. It's telling you that the darker squares are whatever your color 2 are. That's pretty easy to understand. And then we've got this orange box called repeat. So you can see right here, all of these stitches are in orange because we're going to repeat this whole thing over and over. If we just knit this, it would only be 6 stitches wide, but obviously there's many more than 6 stitches here. We've done more than just knit this tiny little section here. So to make this whole thing, we would repeat this. We would knit 3 pink, and let me cover this up for us. We would knit 3 pink, our color 1, then we would knit 3 color 2, and then we would go back here and we would repeat. So we would go 3 and then 3, start back at the beginning of this box of repeat, and we'd go 3C1, 3C2. So we would keep working these same stitches over and over till we got to the end of the knitting, and then we would stop. And then we would work on the next thing. And here it's telling us that we need to break up our square of color with a little dot of the alternative color. And we keep building like that. And it is important to always, if you're going to be starting to chart knit, I would always start with something like a Post-it note or a knitting app that lets you kind of block things off, or there are magnetized ones. But when you do that, because what it does is it visually simplifies things, so you're not paying attention to unneeded information. But the temptation might be to put it, let's say we're working round 4. The temptation might be to put it under round 4, so that just like when you're reading, maybe your teacher put a ruler under something, or you put your finger underneath. And the problem with this is this information for round 4 is now divorced from what we came before it. Whereas if we put it above the round we are working on, we can suddenly see the fabric that will be below what's on our needles. So we could see here, for instance, that in round 4 we need to be switching colors. That there were 3 colors of C1, but now we're switching that and we need to do the opposite. And we can see that because we can see what's below the needles. And by always putting the Post-it note or the other things above, what it does is it gives us a chance to read our work, so that we can realize pretty quickly we've made a mistake. If I'm knitting and I accidentally only knit 2 of these, well, when I go to start my color 1, I can see, wait, I'm not supposed to put that above that. This should be a complete flip. I should be 3 pink, 3 green. So why am I putting pink above pink? That's not how this works. So you can catch a mistake before you get all the way around to the end and have to undo that whole round. It saves us because we can kind of read downwards and locate ourselves in our work. So this chart is telling us that we have a 6-stitch repeat that is also a 6-round repeat. And I can tell that it's a round repeat, not just because I wrote the top here and said in the round, but also because all of the numbers are on this side. Because when we knit in the round, of course, we're always just knitting in the same direction over and over. We knit across, we get around to the same side, and we knit across. Whereas when we're knitting flat, we're flipping things. And so flat charts will have, or should have, the numbers split. So you can see that, okay, on this side I'm going to go this ways, but when I turn the work, well, now I'm going to read that row this way. So the directions go like this. When we knit on the right side of the work, we're knitting from the right to the left. But when we flip, we have to read the chart in the other direction. And that is something you have to pay attention to and really kind of train yourself into, because the temptation is to kind of just keep going from left to right or from right to left. It's just as we do sort of when we read, we get into this zone. We zigzag our way up when we knit flat. So that's just something to keep in mind. You're gonna need to be reading the rows in the right direction. This chart looks different, not only because I made a mistake and scribbled it out, but because the box doesn't go all the way around the stitches. The whole chart is not the whole repeat. So here, I've scratched out what that says. So this is our repeat. And the reason this might be is maybe there's an edge stitch. Maybe we're working this flat and we need to incorporate a button band, or maybe there's just a number of stitches that don't quite work with the number of stitches in our main repeat, and the designer's done something on the edges to make it work. So what this kind of chart would mean is that we're going to work this column only once. We're going to work the repeat over and over until we don't have enough stitches left, basically, and then we will finish up by working these 2 columns. So we would work 1 of this color, and then we would work these 7 stitches over and over again across our knitted fabric, and eventually we're going to get to a point where we should only have 2 stitches left, and then we will work these 2. So if the repeat is not around everything, the designer's telling you that there are edge stitches or something's happening outside that box. Another thing that can trip people up with knitting, and another thing that can trip people up with chart knitting, is that what you see in the box isn't necessarily what you're going to do. So for instance, let's simplify things right here. So this symbol here looks like we're going to be purling. That's a purl symbol. But this is knit flat and we're starting on this side. So actually on the wrong side, we're going to knit. This is actually what garter stitch looks like. This little bit here where we're alternating knitting and purling, that's what garter stitch looks like. But we keep knitting. We only knit to make garter stitch when we're working flat. And so this is showing you a picture of what it's going to look like on the side you are working. So this chart is showing you a picture of what your knitting is going to look like. So on the front, it's going to look like purl bumps, but when you work it, you're just going to knit because you're working on the wrong side. So that's just something to be aware of, is that what you see, you need to make sure you're interpreting correctly based on the right and wrong side. The other key thing that charts can do is they can have things called no stitch boxes. No stitch, seriously, no stitch. What does that mean? Well, that means that when you come to that chart box, you are literally going to skip it because there's nothing happening there. It's like a Jedi mind trick. These are not the chart boxes you are looking for. In this round, we're doing a decrease right here, a center double decrease, and that takes 3 stitches and it turns them into 2. It's a double decrease. We take away 2 stitches. So we now have 2 boxes of no stitches because we just ate up those 2 stitches in this decrease. And as you work across, let's say you're on round or row 14 here, you would slip a stitch, knit 2, knit 1 through the back loop, skip, 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 skip. Ah, I'm doing a decrease, a center double decrease, skip, 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 skip. Ah, I'm doing a twisted stitch, I knit 3. So when you see no stitch, we literally want you just to like pass right over those. Those boxes have to be there so that we can show you kind of what's going on, and that you're always going to be, in this case, lining up twisted stitches on top of each other. And you can see the logic of it, but so we need to put something in those boxes there, but we're wanting you to just like ignore them. So what does this chart look like when it's finished? Well, this chart is this beard. So we're knitting it from the top down. So we start here with all these stitches, and then these center double decreases slowly start to eat up the stitches and give us this triangle shape. These twisted stitches stack on each other when we're knitting, but because of the decreases, lean in and come together. One thing I want to say is that there is no knitting chart police for designers. Each publishing company will have its own standards, its own sort of design book, and designers themselves develop a workflow that makes sense. But because knitting stitches are so varied, because sometimes you're trying to make a chart work for a stitch that no one else has ever charted before, there is no standard. So it's really important to always look at your key. A lot of designers like the dot for what looks like a purl, but there's also a way to do it where it's actually like a dash. So the dot versus the dash isn't like a difference. Sometimes knitters have to invent, or sometimes designers invent their own symbols. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just take a standard symbol, but I'll make it a color. So you know that this means knit through the back loop, but if I gave you that symbol, but it was purple, well, you'd have to go, why is it purple? And it would tell you, oh, well, we're doing a funky version of knit through the back loop or something like that. So even if you think you know what's going on, the first time you knit a chart, make sure you are checking to see what that designer means when they use that symbol. And one final thing about chart knitting is that chart knitting really gives us a lot of information, but it can hide some of that information too. So when we look at this, what are we looking at? We're looking at this cable for this cowl here, and we can see that we've got a lot of reverse stockinette, and that's reflected by the fact that we've got a lot of purls stacked on top of purls. We can see that we've got cables that open and come together, open and come together. So we can see that here, open and come together, open and come together. And that's great because we can see a lot of that information. You can see that this is going to be a right-leaning cable. This is going to be a left-leaning cable. The directions of the cables are built right into the design of the chart so that you don't necessarily need to go and look things up. But one of the things we're constrained by with these is the charting software that we use and these other things, and we can't always make things as obvious as we want. So for instance, did you notice that this right crossing cable is different from this right crossing cable? And it's right here that the difference happens. On this chart, we have a little dot. And on this chart, we just have a line. So if we look over here, we can go, oh, that's because this is a 2/2 right cross cable. Okay, that makes sense. That's what I'm doing. So what's this? Well, that's a 2/2 right purl cross. So in other words, because we're opening up and we're making more reverse stockinette, we need to purl here. But that's really small and it's easy to not see. So it's important to look over and see, is there something that I might be missing? So a lot of people like to go over and actually color code stitches. So they might say, okay, every time I've got that kind of cable, I'm gonna do this color. And it's different than this one because this is a left purl cross. So maybe you'd get an orange marker and do these ones orange, whereas the ones that are right crosses with the purls, you're going to do in that color. So that could be something you do too, is just to double check that sometimes there's a tiny bit of difference. And you'll know that by looking at your key and saying, wait a minute, I don't see that symbol anywhere. What's going on? And you might, maybe your printer didn't print a color. Maybe it just is because of the size of the chart and we're trying to make you not have to print 400 things as designers. Maybe it just got a little small or whatever. So just have a look and make the chart your own. Make it something that makes sense to you and works for you. The great thing about learning to knit from charts is that it can really help you understand the logic of what you're doing, and you don't need to necessarily chant your knitting directions over and over like a magic spell. Knit 1, purl 2, purl cross 4. you can come to a point in your pattern and go, oh, I'm at a section where everything's coming together. I know what I need to do. I'll just shift the stitch over. I'll just shift things closer and closer to each other. And you're not necessarily always going to need to go back to the chart every moment. You're not going to necessarily need to be chanting every bit of your directions, because you can see the logic of it. Being able to see the logic of a stitch chart and then work it, kind of understanding what's going on, will really hopefully help you be more confident, to feel like knitting is a little easier, and that you don't necessarily need to be tied 100% to the pattern all the time. Chart knitting is an amazing ability to sort of get a bird's eye view of what's going on your needles and what's already come before. So I hope that this helps you.